of the Consortium on Drug Policy. And I'm the co-founder. I always say that I'm the co-founder. And, you know, I've been sort of maybe the face you see me around. But you know what? This organization was founded with a graduate student, someone who is 25 years old. And that's why I never say I'm the founder, because it was a joint effort, right? Youth have been a part of everything that we have done. All of our reports have been written by students. All of the policies that we have passed have involved students. And what policies have we passed? How many reports have we written? How many front pages of the Sun-Times, of the Tribune, have youth made possible through their work? You know, I've always thought this is about drug policy, and it is. But really, the Consortium on Drug Policy is about youth leadership development. It really is. Because how many times do people think that young people can't make a contribution? How many times are young people given internships and they're given filing or Xeroxing or doing data entry? How rare is it for young people to come to a place where it's like, where we say, what do you think about this? How do you phrase this? How do you want to attack this? And that's why I think we've been so successful, and that's why this date is about celebrating youth. Because all of these young people have made a tremendous contribution. Overdose legislation in multiple states, naloxone legislation. We implemented Good Sam. The number of reports, our patchwork policy report on marijuana arrests and tickets in Chicago, all done by students. So can we give a round of applause for all the youth? That is the most amazing thing to me. And I remember a number of years ago when someone who I worked with said, you got undergraduates working with you? And I had the undergraduates on speakerphone, and she was talking disparagingly about undergraduates and student work. And then later it became, well, you have a team of writers. We can't turn this around fast enough. So young people can, young people do. ICTV allows them to do that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to this panel. Esther Franco-Payne, Deputy Director of the Illinois, Tarzan Project. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm a little off my game today. I'm sorry. The feedback, the Springfield, and so we're going to let it go as it goes. And if Kadeen is not able to make it, just to contextualize what's going on at the state level, I can jump in with where bills are, what are different ways of attacking this issue, but this first panel is going to happen now. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Can you hear me in the back? Okay, great. So my name is Esther Franco-Payne. I work for the Illinois Justice Project. We are a policy organization that focuses on criminal justice policy, juvenile justice, and adult justice, looking at alternatives to incarceration and reentry, childhood exposure to trauma and violence prevention. So sort of across the gamut, just trying to attack the issue of crime and violence. So today, I am very excited to have our esteemed panelists from the Black Youth Project 100 here in Chicago. And because Kadeen is not here, we're just going to focus on you guys and have a very exciting and invigorating conversation about drug policy and decrim here in the city of Chicago. And since we are down to two panelists, I would very much like to have it be a conversation for us to engage and talk with the audience about, what you think, what you want to know, and what you want to learn. And back to Kathy's point, how is it that we can continue to promote youth leadership in this area of decriminalization? So just based on Kathy's report on marijuana arrests in 2014, I'm just going to give a few facts from that report to contextualize how the discussion is going to go today. So based on that report, the evaluation of arrests and tickets for marijuana misdemeanors in Illinois, nationally, Illinois is ranked 5th in the number of arrests for marijuana possession since 2010. That was a right? Illinois is ranked 3rd in the nation for the black to white racial disparity of marijuana possession offenders, despite the fact that marijuana use is the same between the two groups. Everybody hear that? In Illinois, African Americans were about 7.6 times more likely to be arrested than their white counterparts. And we just received data today from the Cook County Detention Center that showed about 86% of the youth that come through the detention center is for drug possession of some kind. In Cook County, marijuana possession arrests are the highest of any county in the nation, with 33,068 arrests in 2010, and also had one of the worst racial disparity rates in the nation. So we're going from Illinois now down to the county level. Illinois estimated spending for marijuana possession ranged from $78 million to $364 million per year on marijuana possession arrests and adjudication. So this is the cost of how much our system spends on just processing people for drug arrests and adjudications.
That doesn't include incarceration costs? Or
No, this is
Just the court process. In Illinois, 84% of all marijuana arrests are for misdemeanor possession, and these arrests represent a sizable portion of arrests within the state. In Chicago, 93% of misdemeanor marijuana possession violations resulted in an arrest, and only 7% of cases there was a ticket issue. So you know now that the city of Chicago has the tickets for marijuana possession. So 93% for misdemeanor marijuana possession, and of those, only 7% received tickets. Since ticketing has been identified as a way of possibly reducing the negative impact of disproportionate minority contact, Roosevelt assessed municipalities that provided race and ethnicity data. The study results showed that there was no real change in disproportionate minority contact after the ticket ordinances were implemented. Although the Chicago Police Department has said that they have made changes in their internal policies to reduce those ticketing policies. So we'll see what happens in the future, but now we're going to just look to our panelists to talk about some of this and answer some of these questions. So our first question is marijuana reform a social justice issue? And can you talk about why?
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Can you introduce our panelists? I apologize.
Good introduce myself. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Janae Bonsu. I am the co-chair with Malcolm here of the Chicago chapter of the Black Youth Project 100, or BYP 100. BYP 100 is a national organization of 18 to 35-year-old Black activists and organizers, and we organize to basically create freedom and justice for all Black people, and we do this through grassroots organizing, direct action organizing, education, and advocacy. So, to the question, is marijuana reform a social justice issue? Absolutely, especially in a city that has the highest arrest rates for simple possession and the lowest ticketing rate, right? In the city where 78% of those arrests are Black people, with so many studies show that use of the drug is relatively uniform across races. So that shows it's not an issue of, whoa, Black people just smoke a whole lot more weed. It's an issue of disproportionality. It's racial profiling. It's a result of broken windows policing. Using stop and frisk as a proxy or under the guise of we're trying to create more serious crimes when actually it's just racial profiling, it's just racist policing. And so, you know, using arrest for simple marijuana possession, I think it just builds up the carceral state in a way that is not conducive to justice at all. Especially for marijuana use for personal use is not a crime. You know, as we know, crime is socially constructed, right? So it's a crime because the law says it is. But in actuality, drug use is a public health issue and should be addressed as such.
Is the disproportionality as aggravated among African-American women as African-American men?
That's a good question.
Do you want me to repeat it? Did everyone hear that? Is the disproportionality as exaggerated or is it intense between African American men and women? Or is there a difference, gender difference?
I'd be more curious to know why you asked that question.
Well, just to respond on my own, I mean, my intuition tells me that black males are much more discriminated against on the street, and I wondered whether the data supports that intuition or not.
I can answer the question.
If you want, I mean, because I've
Yeah,
looked at the
yeah.
data. Yeah, men are much more targeted. I mean, African American men are much more targeted. In fact, men make up most of the marijuana arrestees, period. So when we are thinking about this, we are thinking about it through, I mean, it appears in a male frame more. Not to say that women don't have contact and are harassed. And so that's not to diminish that, but to say what we see in the data is majority men, period.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, that would be my intuition as well. But yes, black women absolutely do have disproportionate contact with the police in terms of harassment. I think it just looks different. I think when it comes to black women, sexual harassment by police is a much bigger issue. But in terms of low-level marijuana arrests specifically, I don't know what the data looks like as much as Kathy says, but yeah.
I think, Janae, actually, you hit on an important point about sometimes the arrest doesn't happen because something else happens with the police. Do you know what I mean? In terms of women contact, like, oh, do this and this won't happen. I mean, we certainly see that pretty commonly.
Right. And we know that these marijuana arrests happen through stop and frisk policing. So, you know, this happens, like it's a result of like a visibility issue, right? So who's like actually out on the street more, you know, who's more targetable in a visible, I can stop you, you know, on the street and pat you down sense. And I think in that way, you know, it is more likely to be male, right? So.
Malcolm, did you have any other comments about this being a social justice issue?
Yeah, sure, I got a lot of comments. Yeah, I think, essentially what we're talking about is marijuana or the war on drugs is essentially an excuse to constantly criminalize people who share my skin. And that's what we're talking about. Whether it would be marijuana or any other thing, police would be in communities where I live and on the south and west sides of the city, or black and brown communities, and that it's an excuse. And so when you talk about prison, when you talk about what arrests do to people, what they do to your life, you have an entire sector of our society that from ages 10 years old up until they die, that are barred from society, whether that be to get a job, whether that's to get public housing, and are deemed criminal and have records. And so when that happens systemically, we have a very huge issue. So yeah, I think marijuana reform is a social justice issue, but also even the idea of drug use as a criminal act as opposed to one that, as Janae mentioned earlier, one is a public safety issue, not one that should be punishable or at least punitively. So yeah, I think we got a big social justice issue on our hands.
Any questions? Yes, Frank.
I guess this is focused on Chicago, but have you guys seen any areas where they have legalized marijuana and there's still unequal enforcement, like with other types of, like using in public or other types of policies that are still illegal? I don't know.
In terms of, so in states that have legalized marijuana, like
Yeah.
Colorado and Washington, I'm not sure what their disproportionate minority contact data looks like.
Yeah.
Or if it's even available. It'd be interesting to see. But the thing with legalization is if your possession or use or whatever is not aligned with whatever your state laws are, you can still be subject to arrest, subject to ticketing, or what have you. And you know, the black market could still exist if you don't have a license or whatever. So again, I don't know what that actual data looks like in terms of how that is enforced in those two states or anywhere else that has legalized marijuana. I think it's yet to be seen. Kathy, I don't know if you have access to.
So if you're talking
about smoking in public, we do see disproportionate minority contact in Colorado. However, the disproportionality in terms of it is greatly decreased. You know what I mean? There are no arrests, right? So these are tickets. Getting racial profiling out of policing is very difficult. But I think that the results that you see from Colorado suggest a better system, that it does decrease disproportionate minority contact. But again, always with if you're not in the system or if you're not 100% obeying the law. In Colorado, you can't be out in public, you can't use in public. And so, people who don't have places to use that aren't in public, there could be and also the profiling exists, right? If we could even get into people who are undomiciled are going to be in a place where they're more likely to get, ticketed a violation. But I think the ticket price is relatively low, and we do see a huge decrease in games.
Okay, let's move on to our next question. What do you think about our current marijuana policies? And let's just talk about at the city level, since that's where you guys have focused your work.
What do we think about?
Yeah, like what are your concerns? What do you see as the issues around our current and existing policies, or what do you think should happen?
Yeah, so the campaign that we are working on is called Decriminalize Black, because we understand that the issue isn't just legalization, and as an organization, I don't think we relatively care about whether, or at least morally, the drug use or smoking weed is not an issue of, well, it should be legal or not to us. It is understanding that because of this thing, because of marijuana in the city of Chicago, that black folks are disproportionately arrested and targeted because of this thing, though we know in Lincoln Park and Wicker Park, people smoke weed all the time, but do not have the same traumatic experience of police harassing you every day for something as little as a few grams of marijuana. And so we know that the city and McCarthy and the mayor have stated that they, which Esther talked about earlier, have a policing strategy to give tickets as opposed to arrest people. However, that's optional. We've met with superintendents, with the superintendent ourselves, and they've also made these similar claims. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I think I'm answering the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think rhetorically, the current ordinance is okay, right? You know, when you hear Mayor Emanuel or Superintendent McCarthy discuss, you know, marijuana arrests and tickets in the media, you know, the rhetoric is on like, oh yeah, you know, we realize, like, we recognize the disparity, we recognize that, you know, people shouldn't be, you know, that marijuana arrest perpetuates a disparate system and, you know, et cetera, but in actuality, the fact that police still have the discretion to make arrests and they are still acting to make those arrests and not ticket is problematic. So I think the discretion piece is a huge issue, especially if you have, you know, kind of implicit biases towards, you know, targeting Black people. It's problematic, first off. And then secondly, even if police did ticket more, even if Chicago wasn't the second lowest in ticketing rates across the state, I think there's still an issue with the amount that you get ticketed. So in Chicago, your first offense, if you get ticketed, is like $250, relative to other municipalities like DC, where it's like $20 or $25. So when you think about the communities that are over-surveilled, over-policed, who do get these tickets, most likely to be low income, because those are the communities that, you know, are over-policed, where are you going to get $250 from to pay this ticket? And then what is the recourse for it if you don't have the money to pay it? You know, so that's problematic. If we're going to treat marijuana possession as a civil offense and be given a civil penalty for it, like you get a ticket when you speed or, you know, have a traffic violation, then the penalty should be akin to that, right? So when I got a ticket the other day for my parking meter running out, it was $60. So, you know, why do you have to pay $250 to $500 for a marijuana possession ticket? So there's just layers of problems with this ordinance as it is. So I think BYP 100, our goal, like Malcolm said, is not necessarily whether marijuana should be legal or not, and opinions could vary on that. But we do wholeheartedly believe that people should not be arrested for simple possession. It's just not a criminal act. So our goal is a multi-pronged, a multi-tiered approach with regards to direct action, organizing, and policy advocacy to address that discretion, right? Take that discretion away from police and say, you know, if this is a civil penalty, then treat it as such. No arrest for simple possession. And police can do that in practice, in absence of an ordinance change or not, in absence of whether, you know, a policy is passed at the state level or not. Like, they can make the choice to just stop making arrests. So, you know, as an organization, we want to keep pressure on CPD, on Superintendent McCarthy to do that, to stop making those arrests. And also work with other organizations who are doing this work at the state level to advocate for a more comprehensive marijuana policy that you know, decriminalizes marijuana in the state, so that Chicago police have no choice but to adhere to that practice.
Yeah, because what we also know is that Chicago Police Department is one of the worst police departments in the country in terms of transparency and accountability. And so that's why it becomes a question of whether or not it should be a law, because police can say we're doing what we're supposed to do when it's very clear they're not. And right, the issue we've already said and we're saying is that the issue is policing, right? And it's how it's disproportionate, and that isn't as simple as legalizing marijuana or even passing the law. What we're working on is harm reduction. It's understanding that the historic, policing is rooted in a very grotesque, very harmful and traumatic history in this country. And that's where it's rooted. And to change that, or to create transformative and restorative justice from that requires a lot more than saying you can smoke weed for the free and just be okay. And so, that's what we're talking about. And I think what this does, or the statistics, or even shining light on this very specific problem, is it begs the question for communities in Chicago, particularly ones that where there is violence, and not just interpersonal violence, but the violence of closing 50 schools and the violence of closing mental health clinics, where there is rampant violence as such. It begs the question, why do we even need police in this community if their job is to only arrest people for misdemeanor marijuana offenses? And we know, and the data that we got and researched, is that 44 arrests, 44 arrests per day are made for misdemeanor marijuana offenses. That's 44. That's the majority of policing that happens in our communities, right? But we're told on nightly news, on Fox News in particular, every other day, that these communities need police. They need police to be there because these communities are violent, they're dangerous, and they're criminal. But in actuality, the policing that is happening there isn't. It for damn sure isn't stopping any of the violence, but it also is creating a much more complex problem of arresting young people, of destroying lives and families, and creating a revolving door into a financial pit where you have to either pay for tickets or pay court costs or pay all these other things. And so it begs the question, why then are police in these communities? Is this really the right solution to having and creating healthier communities? And that's a rhetorical question because it's not anyway.
Yeah, and there's currently no mechanism of accountability for the policing that's happening to keep us safe. So, the data that we have access to via the work of the Illinois Consortium on Drug Policy, and via folks at the Chicago Reader, like Mick Dumke, who's written extensively about the grass gap. We shouldn't have to go through FOIA requests, to get data. So Superintendent McCarthy comes from the New York City Police Department. He comes from the Newark Police Department, both of whom have very comprehensive, regularly publicized data, right? So that is one mechanism of accountability to say, look, here are our numbers. This is who we stopped and why it resulted in an arrest for this reason. It didn't result in an arrest for this reason. That level of accountability is needed. So when we're in a city like Chicago and we have these terrible numbers that don't result in more public safety, there's no real, unless you're in this work and seeking it out, you don't know that this is a problem, right? And so there's no one to really hold them accountable to this safety. So it's kind of disappointing to have someone who's the head of police department in the city who comes from, really good models of what data transparency looks like, and we don't have that here.
Can I just make one comment about data transparency and the lack of it? I mean, you can't FOIA the police department to get race data, to get a data set. You have to submit a research request, and it takes months to do that. But there is a data portal that you can use, but there's no race data in there, so you have to look at neighborhood data. That's what we did.
That's much of the point of having
Right, exactly. But I mean, so it's interesting that CPD doesn't fall under FOIA law, which has been strengthened. I just wanted to make that point. You can't just submit a FOIA in 5 days. They say, oh, we need more time, or we need this, or whatever, or we're not going to give it to you, we are going to give it to you. You have to go through a completely different channel to get that data. And to me, it's a real problem if you're trying to do, if you're trying to look at something in real time. And why suppressing the race data in the data portal? Why? Why is that not in there? Or ethnicity? I mean, you know.
Can I ask
We have
a question?
questions.
Right, it is a question. So you met with McCarthy, you went through that process. And part of what McCarthy said was part of the discrepancy is because black kids don't carry IDs.
Oh, yeah, oh,
And
yeah.
the law says
Yeah.
you get arrested.
Right.
Have they taken that part of it away? Is that now no longer part of the reason to be arrested?
No, it still is.
Well, I think, yeah, so I mean, you still need to have an ID, but I think they've added a, I don't know, some sort of amendment to where they can look up your identification in alternative ways. So if you have, that they can look you up by your name or address or something like that to see that you are who you say you are. So the
So are we
actual
seeing the
state ID
numbers come down? Are we seeing that actually decrease the number of arrests?
The arrests are going down, but the disproportionality remains the same at 16 to 1. I mean, just to be clear, 16 to 1 now, right now, as we're standing here, you know, in April, it's 16 to 1. The ID issue, I think, was yeah, I'm trying to think of a word that's not a swear word. You know, like, because when I called Champaign to talk about that, they said, what? What do you mean? That's not a problem. You got a computer in the police car, you just pull up the person's ID, and if they don't have an ID, maybe they've been arrested, we pull up their mugshot, it's like not an issue. Right? So, I mean, my understanding was that they changed it, but changing the policy and the practice, two totally different things.
And this was all part of the plan. This is part of Broken Window. You know, he came to Chicago with half of the plan. He came with Broken Window, the half of this is how we arrest the public, but we don't report how we do it.
Yeah, and you know, part of what they were saying too about why arrests were so high is because marijuana arrests, most of the marijuana arrests that happen are a result of it being in conjunction with another crime or happening at the time of another crime, which I also have a hard time believing, because if you're being arrested for a more serious crime and you happen to have, you know, a couple grams of weed on you, the more serious crime would be the one that you're booked for, not,
That's right.
not
Yes.
the marijuana possession. So what are you even talking about? You know, it's really a lot of
It's
going hot air.
right, it's right. And I mean, you know, just so people know, broken windows theory policing has been disproved as an effective strategy. It doesn't work. So I don't understand why our superintendent loves it so. It's, okay, do you want to explain broken windows theory policing?
Broken window sort of says that, you know, we will monitor those lesser offenses or issues, monitor so that it will create a deterrence effect for worse or, you know, more rampant crime. So if I'm tapping my pencil and I'm not supposed to tap my pencil, you're going to monitor that so that I don't throw my pencil. But sometimes those contacts, you know, under broken windows do come into play where they escalate. So, you know, when police are making arrests or contact with persons through contact cars or other forms of initiation, you know, things escalate, which lead to a full arrest. But their thoughts is that, you know, looking over communities to reduce smaller crimes will then deter larger crimes.
Like violence. So the idea is, like, if you have a broken window in a neighborhood, I mean, it's so enticing to believe it because it seems so true, right? Like, you have a broken window, you don't fix the window, people break more windows, and all of a sudden the building is falling down. And but that's not true. It intuitively feels right. I get how people can buy into it, but the research, and I mean, I'm a researcher, so I just believe the research it shows that it isn't effective, and that theory isn't right. So, other questions? I will go over.
And I don't know if Kathy should have best person to answer this, but, so two quick questions. One is, do you know the proportion of young people that are, like, of the arrests? How many of those are young people? The age data? And then the other question is, what happens if you can't pay the tickets? Because with parking tickets, you know, they roll over and eventually your car gets towed. But what happens if you can't pay one? And is there data on that, what, of those people, who those people are?
You have that data, you get a warrant if you have a ticket that goes unpaid. So it does create issues there because, you know, now it's a lesser crime is turned into something bigger. And if you're stopped on a warrant, then you know how that goes. So the more warrants that are issued to you, the more issues you have.
My understanding is the majority of people who are arrested for misdemeanor marijuana violations are young people, and I'm saying young under 30. So,
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the data for that, but like anecdotally, so last year, or maybe it's even late 2013 at this point, as I mentioned, BYP 100 is a national organization, and so nationally, over a year ago, we launched what we call the Criminalized Lives campaign, and it was basically, you know, we were collecting and documenting stories of racial profiling, police harassment, police brutality from young people, young Black folks, and you know, partially to like create a public record for it, and also like as an opportunity for a platform for to begin that healing process, because you know, being harassed, being brutalized by the police is a traumatizing experience. Anyway, so we were collecting these stories a lot here in Chicago, and they are there's a lot of just young, you know, 20s, early 20s to like early 30s, people getting drugs planted on them, just getting stopped for no reason, like misidentifying because, oh, you fit the description, and we all know like what the description is, right? So anecdotally, we know that like, you know, these are young Black folks, but we don't have like the hard data to show it, but.
Do you guys publish that?
No, we have not published the, we haven't published the videos in a concise way. I mean, we admitted to some issues of like media release stuff, consent stuff. So we're trying to figure out how to like publicize that in the best way. But we definitely have the stories. We know that they're out there. We know that they exist.
Yeah, and some of those stories, maybe not in conjunction with, but there's also, I guess, a thing called We Charge Genocide, Shy Cop Watch, which is underneath the coalition or intergenerational effort called We Charge Genocide. And actually in this building, August 2nd of last year, we gathered a bunch of stories of young people being harassed by police, and that has been published on WeChargeGenocide.org's website. Some of those stories are in our comprehensive report, 20-page report that was on police violence in the city of Chicago that we presented at the United Nations in Geneva. And so some of those stories live there if you are interested in reading them.
So I had a question about, I'm just going to talk like this. So far it seems like the conversation at the mayor's level, and even like within the Decriminalized Black campaign, has been around ending this aggressive practice and stopping the bleeding, which I think is important. But I'm curious if you all have thought about situating this conversation within the context of reparations. And what I mean by that is, well, Philadelphia recently, they decriminalized and they committed to putting that money towards rehabilitation efforts, putting that money towards violence prevention programs. Which I understand will be a tough sell under the kind of austerity policies of this mayor, but you know, he also did just come out in support of the reparations for the torture survivors. So I'm curious if you thought about, at the very least, that seems like an important way to frame the conversation, and just what your thoughts are on including that in the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think justice reinvestment is the framework that we are thinking in terms of like if we want a new marijuana ordinance in Chicago, what would it look like? So as we live in a city where at least the last time I looked at the data, I don't know what the figure is now, but the Chicago Reader article says somewhere around $80 million goes into, you know, the court costs and, you know, the arrests and what have you. So thinking about, okay, what could that $80 million be used for instead if marijuana arrest wasn't, you know, wasn't an arrestable offense, right? And so thinking about that money going towards more mental health clinics, towards more substance abuse treatment, towards more school funding. It's just a matter of, like, logistically, like, you know, hard to fine-tuning exactly how that works. But definitely in terms of framework, yes, that's absolutely how we're thinking about how marijuana reform, at least at the city level in Chicago, should change. At the state level, it's something different. I can't really speak to, but yeah, definitely in the city, we're thinking about it in terms of reinvestment. I think framing it as reparations is a slightly different conversation, but yeah, I don't know. I don't really have anything to add, but.
Some of the restorative justice hubs through the Adler University in partnership with the Mansfield Institute here at Roosevelt and Cook County Justice Advisory Council are working on looking at that in terms of justice reinvestment, not necessarily around reparations, but definitely how we can make a policy change countywide to reinvest resources into community as opposed to incarceration. So the trick is having actual cost around detention and incarceration versus the cost of treatment, and then having those numbers to match up so that you know what you're paying for. But there's a lot of work being done in that space, and so we can talk after to maybe try to make some connections there, looking for more information.
But I just think it would be interesting to think about, you know, in the event that marijuana is actually fully decriminalized or legalized. I mean, it's a different conversation, but like for those who have been arrested and actually detained, you know, getting lost wages back if you like had a job and was arrested for marijuana possession, or you know, just thinking about what people lose when they are arrested and are detained, you know, getting that back. So yeah, I think it's a conversation that hasn't really been had in an intentional way that should. So yeah, I think yeah, we should talk more about that, but it's an important question.
I just want to add, you know, even if you're not convicted of marijuana, and we talked about this last year, or convicted of a marijuana possession offense, just the arrest alone can deny you housing. If you're on financial aid, you've lost your financial aid. I mean, this is, and employers can see the arrest. They can't discriminate against you based on it legally.
Right.
But I'm not saying they don't see it. They might not draw a conclusion. You might not have a job. I know Tony Lowry's here.
Yeah, but you still have to check the box.
Right? You know, you've been arrested. It's not a no, it's not just like nothing happens, even if your case is discharged. You know, and I just want people to keep that in mind. But I know you had a question.
My question is related to the kind of work that's being done with high school-aged youth and in Chicago high schools to incorporate restorative justice practices into the discipline code of conduct as opposed to some program that's on the margins in the school system, but incorporated into the discipline code of conduct where the actual disciplinarians in the school, or quote-unquote dean of students, are incorporating these practices and teaching this way of thinking, more importantly, for the young people. Is there any work happening along those lines?
Yeah. For a little bit, I worked at Northwestern Law School as a know your rights advocate, which we lost funding, but we, for about 2 years, taught young people their rights with the police, juvenile justice, and what have you. And there's so many tiny strides. I suppose not tiny. I mean grandiose in a sort of way, but on a small scale happening all across the city, and that's beautiful. But I think more and more it becomes so frustrating because while so much amazing stuff happening, people are still going to prison and lives are still being ruined. And it's like we have to like come at it at the top of the city level, state level. But I know there's so many young people who are doing that and are working to implement that all across the city for sure.
CPS has changed their discipline policy to improve restorative justice. Which last year there was legislation to do that. But I just think that, as Kathy mentioned earlier, there's a difference between policy and practice, right? So the jury's still out on what the outcome is, and that remains to be seen. Their recent report last month showed that there was a decrease in out-of-school suspensions and expulsions. So hopefully things are working, but I think too, individual schools do things in individual ways, and we just have to look at what policies and practice can be implemented across the board that facilitates a more restorative justice environment within the schools. But there's a lot of work being done on that, and there's legislation pending right now, or bills pending in the General Assembly. I think it's SB 100, I can't remember, that is looking at making sure that suspension and expulsion data is produced on a regular basis. Communities United is one of those primary agencies working around that issue.
One thing that we did do an analysis on is the criminal justice system referrals for marijuana treatment. And we haven't released the paper at all yet, but it's all African American youth that are being sent to marijuana treatment. And this is taking up a huge amount of treatment capacity. I'm trying to say, like, sending people to treatment who maybe don't need treatment, there needs to be a screening process in here, because that can be a very negative thing too if the intervention is too much. It's also very expensive, and the research shows, like, if you do two motivational interviews, you can probably get some good success. And this is like 25% or 15% Roman. Do you remember what of our treatment, of all of our treatment slots is criminal justice marijuana referrals to treatment? So if you think about that, and you think about how treatment is being cut, that's the alternative. So African American youth are being sent to inpatient treatment facilities and mixed with kids with heroin problems. That's not a good solution either, right? Like, I just worry about that. But you had a question.
Oh, gosh. I remember seeing a TED Talk one day about willful blindness. And it was so interesting to me, and I really captured that whole TED Talk. I ain't got this twisted. I know what I'm seeing. Whenever I hear things about rehab and, treatment and all this other, discussion and conversation, I'm not in pre-contemplation about what I don't believe that I'm looking at. And sometimes when I'm talking with some clients that I see, sometimes they may need to be in a different state of mind, because what they see right in front of them is an actual massacre of people that look like us. Now, we can talk about policy, we can develop all kinds of conversations around it, but there's something that's missing here. And that discussion I see every single day that I wake up. I look in the mirror, I'm a black man, and I've been very fortunate because I use either street sense as well as an academic opportunity that I've developed over years to say I will not become a victim. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit around and talk about policies that people will only relate to because it makes sense. There is something that has to be done about what I see. And I see a great disparity in treatment of how people look at me. And I'm only using myself because I think as a black man, I am a targeted individual, first of all. Regardless of wherever I go, if I go inside of an elevator, I'm always conscious of how people look at me, you know. But at the same time, I don't want to sit here and discuss a policy. I think there's some other actions that we need to be conscious of. Because what I'm hearing you say, my brother, are things that maybe back in the 60s the Black Panther talked about. I understand the law. There's some things that I won't ever do again. I remember when I was growing up, I don't go to Orland Park to this day because of a racial profiling incident that happened to me some years ago. So, while we're discussing policy, while we're getting a lot of money for treatment, that maybe not be there, you know, if we keep this governor that we have. But I think there's got to be a very deliberate conversation on action that constitute a movement and a commitment from not just people that look like me, but people that can make some changes. Not for those individuals that can sit around and say or suggest that we need to have a discussion about something that I already know about. Because I'm not tainted by what I see. Now,
let's talk about that because that was actually our last question to sort of get a better idea about what the Decrim Black campaign looks like and what are some of the actions that you guys are taking in community, sort of what people can do to get involved.
Yeah, I also didn't want to come here and talk about policy either. I was tired. No, I was fine. Just trying to let me move. But no, I think actually, yeah, I mean, I feel like I've said this tonight or this afternoon, this Saturday, that, you know, as an organization, or I'll speak specifically, well, as an organization, I'm co-chair, I can talk about organization. You know, we are hell-bent on trying to create and imagine the world we want to live in, and not, at least to remain sane, and not just the realization of the one we do live in, which is built upon literal destruction of black bodies. That is what this country is built upon. I know that, I see that. What I hear though, maybe, is, maybe I'm hearing you wrong, but you know, what I've said already is that what we're doing is harm reduction, right? At the very least, if there is no more, if marijuana is decriminalized in the west side of Chicago, I know that that work is going to help somebody, right? And so that's why I think folks work so hard to do that. And when we organize and when we have actions, we attack or confront the people in power, the people that can make those decisions. And I mean, yeah, so like, you know, I suppose there's so many different ways to get at the root of this problem, but I think, you know, tomorrow, you know, white, hetero, cis, old-ass dudes who got a lot of money and perpetuate white supremacist ideals aren't just going to give up their power in a day. And so we have to work hard to deconstruct it, to build community and to do that. And so I don't want to knock anybody that is focusing on policy change, but in our organization, as an 18 to 35-year organization, you know, we work to build and imagine the world that we want to live in that is free of oppression, and we imagine that while constantly working towards it. And you know, we 500 years behind, and it's a lot more work than just, you know, this is not an end all be all, and it is not the only start, I think is what I'd like to say.
Yeah, I'll say some of that. And so I think to speak specifically to the campaign and what we're doing, so what we've done so far and what we will continue to do, we kind of got sidetracked by other work we're doing as well, but we've been, so a part of grassroots mobilization is people power, right? And so we can't mobilize around an issue that people don't know fully about, or you gotta get buy-in from all different pockets. So a lot of what we've been doing what we call street teams and having teach-ins. So in our street teams, we're out in the communities, we out in the hood talking to our brothers and our sisters about like what's actually happening. So, you know, what you may talk about on a panel or it be a fact sheet, like we're just having conversations with people, you know, at the 6030 King Green Line or at the 95th and Dan Ryan Red Line, you know, while somebody's sitting on their porch, you know, having these conversations like, yo, you know how serious this problem is, like, can you join us in fixing it? Can you like join us when we go to CPD headquarters and demand that Gary McCarthy stop, like, order his men to stop making arrests? You know, so just like having teach-ins, having these conversations, getting like community buy-in to mobilize with us is like, is one very important key step. And so that, while not forgetting about the policy part, right? So trying to, so we leveraged a couple meetings with folks like at the mayor's office, at CPD, and so just trying to continue to have those conversations and put pressure on those folks, educate our folks, and really get stuff moving on that. So I think this work in terms of getting at the root of the problem is not, it can't just be one prong, and I don't think that, so yes, decriminalizing marijuana is absolutely harm reduction, and so we're also having other conversations about economic justice, because we know that, you know, let's keep it real, everybody's not just consuming weed. Some people are selling it. Some people, like, that's how they feed themselves and their family, right? And so that speaks to a larger issue of like, where are the jobs at in these communities? So you're investing in, you know, 1,000 more police, or investing in these other things that don't make our community safer. How about we invest in our communities that are blighted, or, you know, have closed schools and have no jobs? You know what I mean? So we're having those economic justice conversations and trying to visualize like what that looks like in conjunction with this, so that we can, you know, really transform the communities in which we live. So that was a lot. So yeah, it's hard work and we're far from done. So, you know, that's kind of the path that we're on right now. The Decriminalize Black campaign is not like a, you know, one shot, you know, 3-month campaign. Like, this is like, we're in this for the long haul. It's gonna take a lot of like continuous pressure. It's gonna take media attention. It's gonna take direct actions. It's gonna take confrontation. It's gonna take a lot of work to decriminalize marijuana in the city of Chicago. It's gonna take a lot of work for this like transformative justice reinvestment, like all of the stuff that we talked about today. We're talking about some years of work, but like, we're here for it. And we're here to, you know, end criminalization of Black youth in Chicago, in Illinois, in the United States, beyond, like, that's what we're trying to do, so.
Any last questions? We have about 3 or 4 more minutes.
I'm unsure. Did you vote? Did you put your organization out there? Did you see something in the runoff? Did you think it was worth it?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Did we vote? Did we see something in the runoff? Did we put our organization out there?
Oh.
We did get out and vote for Black voters, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, with regards to the election, I will say, first of all, that BYP 100, the type of organization that we are in terms of our, like, quite literally our like tax status, like, we don't endorse candidates, right? You know, we don't do civic engagement with the lens of like, you should vote for this person. We do civic engagement from the lens of like, you should exercise your political power in the way that you choose. You should just exercise it and use that power for candidates that our 4-year issues, not like, you know. So anyway, so yeah, we did do civic engagement, get out the vote work, both in the municipal election season and in the runoff, right? And so we did participate in a couple of mayoral debates in which we posed the question specifically about marijuana decriminalization. Would you support marijuana decriminalization? One of the panels, Ron wasn't there, the one in the election season, it was the 4 other candidates. They all were all in support. And so yeah, so like getting the issue out there via like debates and getting, you know, those impressions. But yeah, as individuals, we voted, you know, but like as an organization, like, you know, we don't take a stand on that. We're for who is for our issues, right? So regardless of who's in office, and now that we know we have another 4 years of Rom, and like even if it was true, we'd be at his door too, you know, about the same issue. So you know, it doesn't matter in terms of specific individuals. Like this is our platform. This is what we're for.
I have a comment. I work with an agency called Youth Guidance, and we just did a big event with the CPD. We hosted a basketball game with them, and I actually did a group with about 30 CPD members and McCoskey. One of my first questions was to him is, they have to change. I asked them to drop their no code. They follow code. So I asked them to break their code beside the department. They wanted to come out and build trust with our relationship. And our African American community, I told them we don't have a relationship with them because of the complex trauma that's been inflicted on our people. That's generational. So, but I told them one of the steps is that they can really start looking at on how they police. Criminal justice in our neighborhood is criminal, and they have to reform themselves inside their own department. And that's where it started. I said because as African Americans, we've been changing, we've been constantly changing, but their behaviors and their laws haven't been changing. So I told them that's where it started with us. You are with the top of. They always say the apple don't fall too far from the tree, right? If they criminal to highest level, we're going to be criminal on the lowest level. That's one of the things I really advocated on them. And then I gave my young men the opportunity to talk about the early anger. While we have so much savage anger against the law, because they've been savage against us. And like I say, it's generational. It's my generation, it's further generations. And that had to stop. And that had to come with me. Maybe for like 30, 40 police that I did group with. It was a big event. And like I told them, it shouldn't be about the politics. Come out all the time. Engage with these young guys. Play basketball with them. Change the way y'all arrest on petty crimes. And start with the marijuana arrest. That's a petty crime. But when they don't make it a petty crime, they make it criminal. And just to piggyback off some of the brothers said, unfortunately, society has made black men a crime. But I'm here today to make it a virtue. And that's one thing that we have to understand. A black man will always be a commodity in the society. And so when we look at justice, we look at that as being just is. It's just the way it is. So the change has to come from up top. And like I said, we build a relationship with these guys, get them to take a look at themselves, to do the work on themselves. That's law enforcement. So what y'all doing is a great thing, but it's not about the policy. It's about them changing their behavior. Thank you.
I think that's true, but I also want to say, when you said, this isn't a 3-month campaign, we're in it for the long run, I just want to say, look at New York City. Look at stop and frisk. It has been defanged, right? It took forever. It took forever, and they had decrim at the state level since 1979. It didn't stop the police from stopping and frisking people in the Bronx and Brooklyn. And so even if we change the policy at the state level, this will still be an issue. But I say to, you know, your commitment, that is the commitment that it takes to actually change the practice and to get that. And I think the way that New York did it is by documenting it. And when people see that, they're just shocked, you know? So, I mean, you know, people think, like, the policy, you change the policy, oh, it all disclosed. But that's not true at all.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Kathy. I think, I'm sorry, I'm an artist and a poet, and sometimes I can be, never mind. But I do want to say though, right, like, this is one thing that our organization of 200 plus people nationally is working on, right? And so we understand that we live in a system that is systemically racist, that is systemically sexist, that is all of those things, right? And so, you know, the Brown v. Board of Education changed America in a courtroom and took 20 years to actually change the culture, right, in our communities. And so it's a two-tier thing. You can't. I may feel like my life matters, right? Like the Black Lives Matter campaign isn't a policy, but I would call it a declaration of affirmation, right? It's like, clearly Black lives do not matter in a cultural aspect. It may say that in a constitutional one, but that it takes much more work. You know, if that policy doesn't exist, then to even change the culture takes a lot more time. And this is one thing, amass all the things we do, teaching young people, you know, from teachers to direct organizing and all of those things. And, you know, even in this room with folks, yeah, that you all are also doing amazing work. There is no one solution to a mass, complex abundance of issues. And yeah, I just want to thank all of y'all for being a part of that work and actually taking 2 hours out of your day, because time is the only thing we got, you know, and you're here working and believing in some kind of idea. And yeah, and though we're young, anyway, I'm sorry, I'm just an arrogant young man, but yeah, like we're not, I'm not looking for like advice on how to, I'm looking to build with people to collectively like change that, but like, you know, we out here.
So on that note, we've run out of time, and we're going to end this panel. We thank you so much for your questions, your acknowledge and thank the dean, even though she's not here, you know, and there's a debate about whether policy or grassroots organizing. I think, you know, as Malcolm said, it's not a one-pronged strategy. These things work hand in hand, and so there are people on the front line fighting to undo policies that don't work for our society, and so we just have to make a greater push toward those policies that do make sense and that do promote equity and fairness and justice. And on that note, I'll end. Thank you.